I'm Martha, 34 female. I live in a small, quiet apartment that I cherish, filled with books and the scent of old paper and lemon tea. As a librarian, my life is built on order, predictability, and the quiet satisfaction of helping people find the information they need. For 10 years, I've meticulously saved, carving out a portion of my modest salary for a future I could control, a down payment on a small house with a garden, a place where my cat Milton could safely nap in the sun. This story is about how that carefully constructed future was almost destroyed, not by a stranger or a market crash, but by my own brother, the one person I thought I could trust unconditionally. It's a story about how a simple line of ink on a cashier's check became the only weapon I had to reclaim my life. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My brother Ethan has always been the star of our family. While I found comfort in the quiet aisles of the library, he chased meteors. He was the brilliant son, the charismatic one who could talk his way into any opportunity and out of any trouble. At 32, he had the perfect life on paper, a beautiful wife, Amber, a trendy loft apartment downtown, and the impressive title of startup founder. He was building an app, something about revolutionizing the gig economy. Our parents spoke of him with a kind of breathless pride that always made me feel a little more invisible. They saw his ambition as a virtue, while my stability was seen as, well, just Martha being Martha. Sensible. Boring. I didn't mind. I loved my brother, and his happiness, in a way, felt like a reflection on our family. But I also knew Ethan's secret weakness. He lived on a financial cliff edge. His confidence was a mask for his recklessness. The startup was burning through cash, Amber's boutique was more of a high-end hobby than a profitable business, and their lifestyle, the gallery openings, the weekend trips, the designer clothes, was funded by a mountain of debt and the promise of a future that never seemed to arrive. The phone call came on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was cataloging a new shipment of historical biographies, my favorite task. The library was silent except for the soft patter of rain against the large arched windows. When my phone buzzed with Ethan's name, my first instinct was a familiar, low-grade anxiety. He rarely called just to chat. "Martha, hey, are you busy?" His voice was strained, tight with a panic he was trying desperately to conceal. "Never too busy for you, Ethan. What's wrong?" I said, setting down a heavy tome on Abraham Lincoln. He let out a shaky breath. "I'm in trouble. Real trouble." He paused, and I could hear the muffled sound of Amber crying in the background. My stomach clenched. This was worse than the usual, "Can you spot me a few hundred until my next investor check clears?" "What kind of trouble?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The bank, they're going to foreclose on the loft," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "We're behind on the mortgage. 3 months. They sent the final notice today. We have 30 days to pay the arrears, or we're out on the street." I sank into my chair, the smell of old books suddenly suffocating. Foreclosure? How could it have gotten this bad? Their loft was their pride and joy, the backdrop for all of Amber's glamorous social media posts. "Ethan, how much?" He hesitated. $48,000. The number hung in the air, heavy and impossible. It was a fortune. It was more than my annual salary. "48,000? I repeated, my own voice now trembling. "How did you let it get to that point?" "The last round of funding fell through," he explained, his voice cracking. "I was so sure it was going to come through. I kept telling Amber it was fine, that we just needed to hold on. I used the mortgage money to pay my developers to keep the app alive. I thought I could catch up once the deal was signed, but it all collapsed last week." He sounded broken, stripped of his usual bravado. He sounded like my little brother again, the one who used to come to me when he'd scraped his knee. For the next hour, he laid it all out. The credit cards were maxed out, their savings were gone, and they'd already borrowed from Amber's parents, who had now cut them off. Our own parents, retired and living on a fixed income, couldn't help. I was his last resort, his only hope. "Martha, I know it's an insane thing to ask," he sobbed into the phone. "But I know you're good with money. You've always been so responsible. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. We'll lose everything. Amber is a wreck. Please, I'll pay you back every single cent, I swear it. The minute the new funding round comes through, you'll be the first person I pay. I close. My eyes, picturing my savings account. The number in it was just a little over $50,000. It was the culmination of a decade of discipline. 10 years of packing my own lunch, of mending clothes instead of buying new ones, of saying no to expensive nights out. It was my house fund, my garden fund, my future. But this was Ethan, my brother, his home. The thought of him and Amber being thrown out of their lives falling apart was unbearable. He had made terrible mistakes, but he was still family. What was a house compared to saving my brother from ruin? The family would never recover from the shame of it. My parents would be devastated. I have some money saved, I said, the words feeling like stones in my throat. It's for a down payment on a house, but... Hope surged into his voice, desperate and grabbing. You do? Oh, Martha, you're a lifesaver. You're literally saving our lives. I promise you won't regret this. I didn't feel like a lifesaver. I felt sick. I'll have to go to the bank tomorrow, I said, my mind already racing. I can get a cashier's check. It's the safest way. Yes, whatever you think is best, he said, his relief so palpable it felt like a physical force through the phone. Make it out to the bank or to me, whatever is easiest. I'll make it out to you, I decided in that moment. That way you can deposit it and pay the bank directly. It'll be faster. We hung up and I sat in the silent library for a long time, the rain still drumming against the glass. I felt a profound sense of loss, as if the future I had been so carefully building had just been bulldozed. But underneath the grief was a sliver of something else, a sense of duty, of doing the right thing for family. I was the sensible one, the responsible one, and I was about to make the ultimate sacrifice to prove it. The next morning felt surreal. The rain had stopped, but the sky was a blanket of flat, gray clouds. The world seemed to have lost its color. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, my voice sounding foreign and shaky to my own ears. My boss, Mr. Henderson, was so surprised that he asked if I needed him to call a doctor. I assured him I was fine, just a bad migraine. The lie tasted bitter. Walking to the bank felt like a funeral march. Every step was heavy. The $50,000 in my savings account wasn't just a number on a screen, it was tangible. It was the vacations I never took, the car I never upgraded, the thousand small pleasures I denied myself for a bigger goal. It was a decade of my life, condensed into a single figure. And I was about to give it all away. Inside the bank, the air was cool and sterile. I spoke to a teller, a young woman with kind eyes named Maria, and explained that I needed to withdraw nearly my entire savings to get a cashier's check. She looked at the amount on her screen and then back at me, her expression a mixture of surprise and professional discretion. "That's a very large withdrawal, ma'am," she said softly. "Are you sure? We just want to make sure everything is okay." For a fleeting second, I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to confess that my reckless brother was about to torpedo my future and that I felt like a fool for letting him. But I couldn't. It was a family matter. "Everything is fine," I said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "It's for a family emergency, a mortgage payment." As she prepared the paperwork, an idea sparked in my mind. It wasn't born of suspicion, not yet. It was born of my librarian nature, my ingrained need for order and clarity. I dealt with contracts, with terms, with the fine print of life. This was a loan, a massive one, and it needed to be treated as such, even within the family. I needed to ensure the money went exactly where Ethan said it would. It was my way of maintaining a tiny sliver of control in a situation where I felt I had none. "When you make out the cashier's check," I said to Maria, leaning closer to the glass partition, "could you add something to the memo line for me?" "Of course," she said, pen poised over the form. "What would you like it to say?" "Please write, for mortgage payment only." She nodded, scribbling it down without a second thought. To her, it was just a client request. To me, it felt like drawing a line in the sand. It was a declaration of purpose. This money had one job and one job only: to save my brother's home. When she handed me the check and the carbon copy receipt, I carefully folded the receipt and tucked it into a secure pocket in my wallet. The check itself felt dangerously powerful in my hands. It was a simple piece of paper, but it held the weight of my entire future. I met Ethan at a coffee shop halfway between the bank and his loft. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, and he hadn't shaved. He looked like the frantic, desperate man I'd spoken to on the phone. He hugged me tightly when I walked in, so GHTLY, it was hard to breathe. "Martha, thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means to us, to me." We sat down, and I slid the bank envelope across the table. He opened it, and his eyes widened at the sight of the check. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over his face, erasing some of the tension. "I'm going to go straight to the bank from here," he said, his voice firm with renewed purpose. "I'll get this deposited and make the payment online today. I'll send you the confirmation as soon as it's done." "Just make sure it gets there, Ethan," I said, my voice low and serious. "That's everything I have." "I know," he said, looking me directly in the eye. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something I couldn't quite read in his expression, but I dismissed it as shame. "And I will never, ever forget this. I'll make it up to you, you'll see. My new investor meeting is next month. This is just a bridge. Once I'm across it, you'll be my first priority." He folded the check carefully, put it in his inside jacket pocket, and stood up. He hugged me again, a quick, almost businesslike embrace this time, and then he was gone, striding out of the coffee shop with a purpose I hadn't seen in him in years. I sat there for a long time, nursing a cold cup of coffee. The coffee shop was bustling with people laughing, working on laptops, living their ordinary lives. My own life felt anything but ordinary. I had just handed over my security, my dreams, my future. The feeling of loss was immense, a hollow ache in my chest. But as I walked home under the gray sky, I told myself I had done the right thing. Family comes first. I had sacrificed for my brother. Now all I could do was trust him. The first few days after I gave Ethan the money were filled with a strange, quiet emptiness. My bank account was a wasteland, and the house I'd been dreaming of felt further away than ever. But a sense of peace began to settle in. I had done something good. I had helped my family. Ethan sent me a text the day after our meeting, all sorted. "Can't thank you enough. You're the best sister in the world." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. The confirmation he had promised never arrived, but I didn't press him. He was dealing with so much, and I didn't want to add to his stress by nagging him for paperwork. I trusted him. About a week later, I called him to see how things were going. He sounded different. The frantic, desperate edge was gone, replaced by his old, breezy confidence. "Things are great," he said, a little too cheerfully. That whole mess was a huge wake-up call. Amber and I are really tightening our belts, focusing on what's important. The new investor meeting is looking really promising, too. We're back on track, all thanks to you. "I'm so glad to hear that, Ethan," I said, genuinely relieved. "How is Amber doing?" "Oh, she's so much better. The stress was really getting to her. We're just taking some time to decompress, realigning our priorities." It all sounded perfect, plausible, exactly what I wanted to hear. So I went back to my quiet life, to my books and my cat, feeling like I had weathered the storm. The dream of my own house was delayed, not destroyed. I could start saving again. It would be hard, but I had done it once and I could do it again. The discovery happened 2 weeks after I'd given him the check. It was a Saturday morning. I was sipping my tea and scrolling idly through social media, something I rarely do, but I like to keep up with Amber's page. It was a window into a world so different from my own, a world of fashion shows, exclusive parties, and artisanal everything. Her posts had been quiet for the past couple of weeks, which I assumed was part of their tightening the belts phase. But that morning, she had posted, and it wasn't a picture of them eating ramen noodles or selling their designer furniture. It was a photo album. The cover image was a selfie of her and Ethan, both beaming, their faces tanned and glowing. They were wearing sunglasses, and behind them was a stretch of impossibly white sand and turquoise water. The caption read, "Surprise getaway. Sometimes you just have to unplug and recharge the soul. So grateful for my amazing husband for making this happen. Blessed travel, Caribbean." I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Caribbean? A surprise getaway? I clicked through the album. There were dozens of photos. Ethan and Amber on a catamaran, holding champagne flutes. Amber posing in a new, expensive-looking bikini on the beach. Ethan laughing as he rode a jet ski. They were staying at a luxury all-inclusive resort, the kind of place that costs thousands of dollars a night. In one photo, Amber proudly displayed a new designer handbag, with a caption thanking Ethan for the early anniversary present. The tea in my stomach turned to acid. It couldn't be. This had to be a mistake. Maybe these were old photos, a throwback post, but the date stamp was from the day before, and their tans were fresh. This was happening right now. My hands started to shake. I thought back to Ethan's words, realigning our priorities, tightening our belts, taking time to decompress. Was this what he meant? Decompressing in a 5-star resort in the Caribbean while I was eating canned soup to save money. The sick feeling in my stomach intensified, churning into a cold, hard knot of dread. The foreclosure, the 30-day deadline, the frantic phone call. It had been just over 2 weeks. There was no way they could have paid the bank, stabilized their finances, and then booked a spontaneous luxury vacation in that amount of time, not without a sudden, massive infusion of cash. My cash. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. He hadn't used the money for the mortgage. He had lied. The entire performance, the tearful phone call, the desperate meeting, the promises to pay me back, it was all a charade. He hadn't been on the brink of foreclosure. He had been on the brink of having to cancel a vacation. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked over to the window, looking out at the drab street below. The world outside was gray and mundane, while my brother was living in a sun-drenched paradise paid for with my future. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, it felt like it was rewriting my entire understanding of our relationship. Every memory of his charm, his charisma, now seemed sinister. Every time he had called me sensible or responsible, it felt less like a compliment and more like an assessment of a target. He knew I was the dependable one, the easy mark. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and angry. They weren't tears of sadness, but of pure, undiluted rage. He hadn't just taken my money. He had taken my trust, my sacrifice, my love for him, and he had cashed it all in for a week of sunshine and champagne. He had laughed at my prudence while sunbathing on a beach paid for by my decade of discipline. The image of them smiling in the sun, so carefree and happy, burned itself into my mind. That picture wasn't a vacation photo. It was evidence. It was the spark that would ignite the fire. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't let him get away with it. The quiet, sensible librarian was gone. In her place was a woman who had just been handed a declaration of war. The rage simmered for the rest of the weekend. It was a cold, focused fury that pushed aside the hurt and the grief. I didn't cry anymore. I started thinking. My mind, usually occupied with the dewy decimal system and literary history, shifted into a different mode. I was no longer just Martha the librarian, I was Martha the researcher. And the subject of my research was my brother's grand deception. My first move was to call my best friend, Sarah. As a paralegal, Sarah lived in a world of evidence, contracts, and consequences. She was practical, sharp, and fiercely loyal. I met her at a quiet diner, the same one where we'd been dissecting our lives since college. I laid out the whole story, my voice flat and devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me. I showed her the pictures on my phone. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing harder with every word. When I finished, she slowly pushed her coffee cup aside and looked at me. "Martha," she said, her voice tight with anger on my behalf, "he didn't just take your money. He committed fraud." "I know," I said, "but how can I prove it? It's my word against his. He'll just say the money was a gift. Our parents would believe him. Everyone would believe him." No, they won't, Sarah said, leaning forward. Because you're a librarian, you're organized, you create paper trails without even realizing it. Think, what documentation do you have? Any texts? Emails? I shook my head. It was all on the phone, and one text from him after just saying all sorted. It felt so flimsy. Okay, what about the money itself? She pressed. How did you give it to him? A cashier's check, I said, and then like a lightning bolt I remembered. The teller, the memo line, the receipt. Oh my God, I whispered. The receipt. I practically ran home from the diner. My hands trembled as I fumbled through my wallet, pulling out the folded carbon copy of the cashier's check. I had shoved it in there and forgotten about it. I smoothed it out on my kitchen table. There it was, in clear, typed print from the bank's machine. The date. The amount, $48,000. The payee, Ethan Miller. And in the memo line, the 4 words that could change everything. For mortgage payment only. I took a photo and sent it to Sarah immediately. Her reply came back in seconds. Martha, this is it. This is the smoking gun. She explained it to me in clear, simple terms. A regular personal check with a memo line is just a note, but a cashier's check is different. It's a direct obligation of the bank. When I had the bank issue that check with a specific, restrictive memo, I was creating a legal instruction for the use of those funds. By endorsing that check and depositing it into his personal account for a purpose other than what was specified in the memo. A purpose he clearly couldn't claim was for a mortgage payment if he was on a beach in the Caribbean. He hadn't just broken a promise to me. He had potentially committed bank fraud by misrepresenting the use of a financial instrument. He cashed a check under false pretenses, Sarah explained over the phone. The memo line establishes your intent and the specific purpose of the funds. His immediate expenditure on a lavish vacation is proof that he never intended to honor that purpose. This isn't a family squabble anymore, Martha. This is a legal matter. Her words gave me a strange sense of power. The paper trail was real. I had evidence, but I needed more. I needed to know for sure that the mortgage hadn't been paid. The next day, I took another personal day. My first call was to Ethan's mortgage company. I knew the name of the bank from a piece of mail I'd once seen at his loft. Getting information wasn't going to be easy due to privacy laws, but I had a plan. I wasn't asking for his balance. I was a concerned family member trying to help. Hello, I said to the customer service representative, pitching my voice to sound concerned and a little flustered. My name is Martha Miller, and I'm calling about my brother, Ethan Miller's mortgage. He's been very unwell, and I'm handling some of his affairs. I sent a payment on his behalf a couple of weeks ago, a cashier's check, and I just wanted to confirm that it was received and applied correctly. The mail can be so unreliable. The representative was cautious. I can't discuss the specifics of the account, ma'am. Oh, I understand completely, I said quickly. I don't need any specifics. I just want to know if a payment of $48,000 was posted to his account on or around the 15th of last month. If not, I need to put a stop payment on the check immediately because it may have been lost or stolen. The mention of a specific, large amount and the threat of a stop payment was the key. It was now a security issue for the bank. She put me on hold. The minutes stretched on, each one an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs. Finally, she came back on the line. Ma'am, I have checked the account history for the last 30 days. I can confirm that no payment of that amount has been received. The confirmation was cold, hard, and absolute. He hadn't paid a single cent. He took the money and ran. My investigation was complete. I had the motive, the vacation, the means, my money, and the evidence, the check receipt and the confirmation from the bank. The entire story was laid out in a neat, undeniable line. The photos of him on the beach were no longer just a source of pain, they were part of my file. I screenshotted every single one, including Amber's captions boasting about their lavish trip. I spent the rest of the day in a state of calm, methodical preparation. I printed the photos. I made a high-quality copy of the cashier's check receipt. I wrote down the date and time of my call with the mortgage company and the representative's name. I compiled everything into a single, neat folder. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not in a hot-headed, emotional way. This was about justice. It was about accountability. My brother had built his life on a foundation of charm and deception, and I was about to show him what happens when you swindle a librarian. We know how to organize the facts, and we always keep the receipts. With my folder of evidence sitting on my coffee table, I felt a shift in my own identity. The hurt was still there, a deep, resonant ache, but it was now overlaid with a steely resolve. I had two paths before me. I could go to the police and the bank, report the fraud, and let the legal system crush him. The thought was tempting. It would be swift and brutal. But Sarah, in her infinite wisdom, suggested a different approach first. "Look, you can burn his life to the ground with this," she told me over the phone after I walked her through my findings. "And honestly, he deserves it. But that's a nuclear option. It will incinerate your family relationships forever. Your parents will be caught in the blast zone. Is there a way to use this evidence as leverage to get your money back first? You can always go nuclear later if he refuses." She was right. As angry as I was, the thought of my parents having to visit their son in jail or deal with the public humiliation of a fraud charge was gut-wrenching. They were innocent. My fight was with Ethan, not with them. So we devised a plan. It wasn't about shouting or crying. It was a strategic maneuver designed to corner him, leaving him with no choice but to undo the drama. He had done. The first step was to wait. I needed him back from his sun-drenched paradise. I watched Amber's social media like a hawk. A week after the first photos appeared, a new post went up. It was a picture of their apartment, perfectly tidy, with a caption, "Home, sweet home, so sad to leave paradise, but excited to get back to the grind. Hustle." The grind? I almost laughed out loud. His grind was about to get a lot harder. I waited one more day, letting them settle back into their fraudulent reality. Then, I initiated the plan. It began with a simple, innocuous text message to Ethan. "Hey, hope you had a good trip. You looked so relaxed. We need to talk about the repayment plan for the loan. Let me know when you're free this week." I intentionally used the word loan, not money. It was a small but crucial detail. I was establishing the legal nature of our transaction. His reply came almost instantly, and it was dripping with the casual arrogance of someone who thinks they've gotten away with it. "Hey Marth, trip was amazing, just what we needed. Yeah, for sure, we can chat. Things are a bit crazy getting back into the swing of things, but how about sometime next month?" Next month? He was pushing me off, treating my $48,000, my entire life savings, like a bar tab he'd settle whenever he felt like it. This was exactly the response I had expected, and it was the first tile in the trap I was laying. My reply was just as calm and simple. "Actually, I think we need to talk this week. It's important. How about I come over on Thursday evening, around 7? I didn't give him an option to refuse. I stated when I was coming. He hesitated, the three little dots on the messaging app appearing and disappearing for a full minute. Finally, he replied. Yeah, okay. Thursday at 7 is fine." He thought this would be an awkward but manageable conversation about interest rates and timelines. He had no idea he was scheduling his own judgment day. For the next 2 days, I prepared. I went over the details with Sarah. The plan was not to confront him with anger, but with cold, hard facts. I would be a creditor discussing a defaulted loan. My folder of evidence was my briefcase. When Thursday evening arrived, I dressed carefully. Not in my usual librarian cardigans, but in a sharp, dark pantsuit I usually reserved for professional conferences. I wanted to project authority. I walked to their loft, the folder tucked securely under my arm. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. Amber opened the door, a fake, bright smile plastered on her face. "Martha, so good to see you," she chirped, air-kissing the space next to my cheek. She was still tan, and the expensive handbag she'd flaunted in her vacation photos was sitting on the console table in the hallway. "Hello, Amber," I said, my voice even. Is Ethan here? He's just finishing a call, she said, leading me into their living room. The loft was immaculate, a sterile monument to good taste and bad debt. Ethan emerged a moment later, wearing that same charming smile he'd used on me in the coffee shop. Martha, hey, sorry about that investor call, you know how it is. I'm sure I do, I said, remaining standing. I didn't want to get comfortable. This wasn't a social visit. He and Amber sat on their plush white sofa, looking at me expectantly. They thought they were in control. So, Ethan began, leaning back casually. You wanted to talk about the loan. Like I said, I am so incredibly grateful, and I am fully committed to paying you back. The new funding is looking really solid, and once that lands. I cut him off. I'm not here to talk about your funding, Ethan. I placed my folder on their glass coffee table. The sound was quiet but definitive. I opened it and took out the first document, a high-quality print of the photo of him and Amber on the beach. I slid it across the table toward them. Ethan's smile faltered. Amber's eyes widened. You look happy, I said calmly. Relaxed, recharged. Ethan cleared his throat. Martha, it was a last-minute deal we got. We needed the break. The stress of the foreclosure must have been immense, I continued, my voice like ice. I then slid the second document across the table, the copy of the cashier's check receipt with the memo line, for mortgage payment only, clearly visible. Ethan stared at it, the color drained from his face. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Amber looked from the receipt to Ethan, confusion and panic dawning on her face. And finally, I said, my voice dropping lower, I took the liberty of calling your mortgage company on Monday. I have the name of the representative I spoke to and the exact time of the call. They confirmed that no payment of $48,000 has been posted to your account. In fact, no payment of any kind has been made in over 3 months. Silence, the air in the room was thick and heave. Why Ethan's charismatic mask had shattered, leaving behind the pale, terrified face of a man who had been caught. Amber looked like she was going to be sick. This check, I said, tapping the receipt with my finger, was issued with a restrictive clause. Its purpose was singular and legally defined. You endorsed and cashed it, then immediately used the funds for a luxury vacation. That isn't just a broken promise between siblings, Ethan. That is misappropriation of funds. It's bank fraud. I let the words hang in the air. I didn't need to shout. The weight of the evidence was doing all the work. He had nowhere to run. Ethan stared at the papers on the table, his jaw working silently. The charming, confident startup founder was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. Amber was white as a sheet, her eyes darting between me and her husband. The beautiful, curated life they had built was crumbling around them in real time. Martha, I can explain, Ethan stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. There's nothing to explain, I said, my voice cold and steady. I wasn't going to let him talk his way out of this, not this time. You requested $48,000 to stop a foreclosure on your home. I gave you that money under the explicit, written condition that it be used for that purpose and that purpose only. You took my entire life savings and spent it on a vacation. These are the facts. They are not up for debate. Amber finally found her voice, a high-pitched, panic sound. A gift, it was a gift. You were helping your brother. A gift does not come with a legally binding memo on a cashier's check, I retorted without even looking at her. My focus was entirely on Ethan. This was a transaction with a stated purpose, which you violated. The bank takes that sort of thing very seriously. And I have a paralegal friend who is very excited about the term fiduciary duty. The mention of a paralegal seemed to land like another body blow. Ethan flinched. He knew I wasn't bluffing. What do you want, Martha? He whispered, finally looking up at me. The fear in his eyes was mixed with a dawning resignation. What I want, I said, leaning forward slightly, is my money, all of it. $48,000, not next month, not when your imaginary investor comes through. I want it now. I don't have it, he cried, his voice breaking. We spent it, the trip, some other debts, it's gone. Then you will find it, I said. You will sell whatever you have to sell. You will cash out whatever you have. Amber, perhaps that new handbag is returnable, or the watches, the car. This beautiful loft is filled with expensive things. You will liquidate whatever is necessary to make me whole. I laid out my terms. They were non-negotiable. You have 72 hours to transfer $48,000 into my bank account. I've already written down my account number for you. I slid a small piece of paper with my banking details across the table. If the money is not in my account by 5:00 p.m. on Sunday, then on Monday morning, my friend Sarah and I will be taking this folder. I patted the folder gently to 2 places. First, to the district manager of the bank where you cashed that check. And second, to the district attorney's office to file a formal police report for fraud. Amber let out a small gasp. You wouldn't, Ethan said, his voice pleading. Martha, we're family. This would destroy me. It would destroy our parents. You are the one who destroyed our family, Ethan, I shot back, my voice finally rising with the force of my suppressed anger. You did it when you lied to me. You did it when you cried on the phone about losing your home while you were probably booking your flights. You did it when you took my sacrifice, my 10 years of hard work, and you drank it on a beach. You destroyed our family. I am just delivering the consequences. I stood up. The meeting was over. My verdict had been delivered. 72 hours, Ethan. The clock started the moment I walked in this door. I turned and walked toward the exit without a backward glance. I could hear Amber start to sob, a raw, ugly sound. I could feel Ethan's desperate eyes on my back, but I didn't stop. I walked out of their loft, leaving the wreckage of their lies behind me, and closed the door with a firm, satisfying click. The walk home was different this time. The air felt lighter. The city lights seemed brighter. I hadn't gotten my money back yet, but I had reclaimed something far more valuable, my power. I was no longer the victim. I was the one in control. The sensible, quiet librarian had found her voice, and it was stronger than I ever could have imagined. The next 2 days were a silent war of nerves. I didn't hear a word from him. I went to work at the library, the quiet routine a soothing balm. Mr. Henderson commented that my migraines seemed to be gone and that I looked better than I had in weeks. He had no idea. On Sue. End day afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my banking app. I held my breath as I opened it. Deposit received, wire transfer. Amount $48,000. I stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading across my face. He had done it. He had found the money. I didn't know how, and I didn't care. I didn't know if he'd sold their car, returned Amber's luxury goods, or borrowed from some other unsuspecting soul. It didn't matter. My future was back in my hands. The house with the garden was a possibility again. I sent one final text message to Ethan. Confirmation received. Consider our business concluded. He didn't reply. I didn't expect him to. The arrival of the $48,000 in my bank account wasn't a moment of triumphant celebration. There was no champagne, no victory dance. It was a moment of quiet, profound relief. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted from my soul. I looked at the number on the screen, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe again. It wasn't just money. It was my life, my effort, my future, returned to me. My relationship with Ethan, however, was shattered beyond repair. He didn't reach out, and neither did I. The silence between us was a chasm, deep and uncrossable. The news of our schism eventually reached our parents, though not the details. Ethan and Amber told them a vague, sanitized story about a misunderstanding over a loan that had caused a falling out. They painted me as cold and unforgiving. Our parents, ever wanting to keep the peace, called me. Martha, honey, my mother said, her voice laced with concern. Ethan is so upset. He said you two had a fight about money. Can't you just work it out, your family? It was one of the hardest conversations of my life. I wanted to scream the truth at them. I wanted to tell them that their golden son was a manipulative fraud who had stolen from me. But what good would it do? It would break their hearts and force them to choose a side in a war they didn't even know was being fought. It would confirm their worst fears about their son's instability and shatter the perfect family image they clung to so tightly. So I made a choice. I would protect them from the ugliest parts of the truth. Mom, Ethan and I just see things very differently when it comes to finances and responsibility, I said calmly. We had a serious disagreement, and I need some space from him right now. It's for the best. I love you both, but I can't discuss it any further. It was an incomplete answer, but it was an honest one. It drew a boundary. They were unhappy with it, but they eventually accepted it. The family gatherings became awkward. Ethan and I would be in the same room, a holiday or a birthday, and we would offer polite, empty greetings. We were like two strangers who happened to share the same parents. The warmth, the shared history, the bond of siblings, it was all gone, replaced by a cold, formal truce. Amber avoided my gaze entirely. I saw the fear in her eyes whenever I was near, and I took a quiet satisfaction in it. They knew what I was capable of. They knew I still had the folder. A few months later, the consequences of their actions finally caught up with them in a way that had nothing to do with me. Ethan's startup, predictably, failed. The new funding never materialized. The charade was over. Without my money to cushion them, their tower of debt collapsed. They lost the loft. Not to foreclosure, but because they simply couldn't afford the rent anymore. They were forced to sell most of their expensive belongings and move into a small, nondescript apartment in a less fashionable part of the city. Amber's boutique closed down, and her social media presence went dark. Their glamorous life had been a house of cards, and a single gust of reality had blown it all away. I didn't feel joy at their downfall. I just felt a sense of inevitability. It was the natural conclusion to a life lived on lies. As for me, I started rebuilding. I went back to my dream. I started looking at houses again, this time with a renewed sense of purpose and a much harder-won wisdom. I found a small cottage on the edge of town, with big windows and a little patch of earth out back that was perfect for a garden. Using my returned savings, I made a down payment. The day I got the keys was one of the proudest moments of my life. Walking through my own front door for the first time, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. This house wasn't just brick and mortar. It was a symbol of my resilience. It was a fortress built not just with money, but with self-respect. I had faced the ultimate betrayal from my own family, and I had not only survived, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more in control of my own destiny than ever before. My cat, Milton, immediately found a sunny spot by the living room window to nap. I sat on the floor of my empty house, the sun warming my face, and I smiled. The rubble of my old life was behind me, and from it, I had built something new, something real, something that was entirely my own, and it was beautiful.